When I was 12 years old, my father took me out behind the barn and showed me how to replace a fuel filter on a generator. He handed me the wrench and said, "This land runs because we know how to keep it running." That's stuck with me every day since. I guess that's why, even now, at 42, I still live on the same 12-acre plot my folks left me, tucked away just outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. Some people say it's outdated, stubborn, antisocial even, but I call it mine. And in a world that's always trying to sell you something or squeeze you into some box, that means everything. The house isn't fancy. Ranch style, built back in the 70s, with a wraparound porch I rebuilt myself after a tornado took half of it in 2014. There's a solar rig out back I installed piece by piece over 3 summers, a well that taps deeper than any HOA would approve of, and a workshop I treat better than my own bedroom. I'm not off the grid, not exactly, but close enough that when the lights go out in town, mine stay on. For years, my closest neighbors were deer, and the occasional cow that wandered over from Tom Halverson's spread to the east. That changed about 4 years ago, when the developers showed up with blueprints and smiles and promises of a modern, unified community experience. What they meant was boxy prefab homes packed onto quarter-acre lots with strict lawn regulations and a color-coded mailbox policy I kept to myself. They built a perimeter fence, but their edge butted right up to my western boundary. I figured that'd be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 months ago, I got a letter in a crisp white envelope. No return address, just embossed initials, SHHA. Sunny Hollow Homeowners Association. Inside was a typed note and an offer. They wanted to buy my land, claimed it was for community expansion, and that I'd be fairly compensated based on recent appraisals. I didn't even make it past the second paragraph before tossing it in the fire pit out back. 2 weeks later came a second letter. Same initials, same faux professional tone, this time with a highlighted number, $600,000. I laughed out loud. That might have sounded generous to someone who didn't know what they had. But I knew every inch of this land, where the water ran, where the cottonwoods leaned in summer, where my dog Banjo liked to nap in the shade. You can't put a price tag on that. Then came the visit. I was fixing the fence by the south pasture when I heard tires on gravel. Slow, deliberate. I wiped my hands and turned to see a spotless white SUV roll up and park just outside the gate. Out stepped a woman in a pale blue pantsuit, clipboard in hand, heels clicking like she owned the place. "Mr. Reed?" she asked, with a wide, rehearsed smile. "That's me," I replied cautiously. "I'm Karen Martell, president of the Sunny Hollow Homeowners Association. We've sent you a few letters, I noticed." She launched into a speech about shared community values, expansion plans, how she envisioned cohesive residential harmony that extended past the current boundaries. It was like someone had fed a realtor chatbot too much coffee. I waited until she paused for breath. "Not interested," I said flatly. Her smile didn't even flicker. "Well, I understand this property may hold sentimental value, but I'd encourage you to think of the bigger picture." I gestured to the open field behind me. "This is my bigger picture." Something shifted in her eyes then. Just a flicker, like a shadow passing behind her pupils. But the smile came right back. "Of course. You have my card," she said, placing it on my fence post like she was marking territory. Then she turned, got back in her SUV, and drove off, slow and deliberate, same as she came. For a while, I figured that was it. Rebuffed the sales pitch. Life goes on. But the next week, I noticed a white sedan parked by the HOA's edge of the property. It didn't move for hours. The day after that, 2 men in safety vests were seen walking the perimeter with clipboards and measuring tape. I watched them from my porch, arms crossed, not saying a word. When they saw me, they waved and shouted something about surveying the area for improvements. I didn't wave back. Something was brewing. I could feel it, like static in the air before a lightning strike. I didn't know it then, but I was about to wake up to the sound of diesel engines and the crunch of dirt being torn apart. And when I did, everything I thought I knew about lines, property lines, legal lines, moral lines, would be tested in a way I never imagined. I woke up that morning to a sound I hadn't heard since the county widened the main road back in 2009. The low, bone-rattling groan of diesel engines idling too close, too early. At first, I thought it was a passing rig, maybe someone lost and turning around. Then I heard the clank of a backhoe arm slamming into earth. I swung my legs out of bed, pulled on my boots without socks, grabbed Banjo's leash, and stepped outside. The first thing I saw was dust. Thick, rolling clouds of red dirt kicked up by machinery that had no business being where it was. Then came the machines themselves. One dozer, two backhoes, and a dump truck, all parked along the edge of my western fence line, engines running, metal flashing in the sun. Men in hard hats and orange vests moved like they were on a military schedule. And standing in the middle of it all, as if she was directing traffic in a designer scarf and reflective vest, was Karen Martell. She saw me. She smiled like this was just another friendly HOA barbecue. "Morning, Mr. Reed," she shouted over the roar of machinery, waving like we were old neighbors. "What the hell is this?" I barked, marching toward the fence, Banjo growling low at my side. Karen strode up like this was a pre-scheduled meeting. "Just a bit of work on our side of the boundary," she said, holding up a clipboard like it gave her divine authority. "Routine drainage and soil reinforcement." I stared past her at the trench they were carving out. It started about 4 feet from the fence and ran deep. I mean, deeper than a foundation footing, easily 6 feet, and widening by the minute. But the real kicker was that it wasn't stopping. The machines were looping the dig. Not just along the HOA side, they were moving to surround the entire border of my land. "You planning to dig all the way around?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Karen's grin widened, just enough to show teeth. "Well, now that you mention it, yes." The audacity knocked the breath out of me for a second. "And you didn't think you needed to ask me first?" I said. "We checked the plat lines," she said smoothly. "According to our documents, this trench is entirely within the HOA's jurisdiction. You should probably take another look at your survey maps." My fingers itched to grab the file from my cabinet, the one with the original deed, the county survey, and the signed statement from my father confirming every inch of this land. But I knew damn well I hadn't misplaced a single foot. "Karen, you're encroaching. This is illegal." She made a theatrical gesture, palms out, like I was overreacting. "Oh, come on now, Evan. No need for dramatics. Look at it this way. A little isolation might help you reconsider our offer." I blinked. She didn't even try to hide it. "You're trapping me on my own land." "Not trapping," she said, voice syrupy sweet. "Just creating a little breathing room." I looked at the dozer, now pivoting toward my eastern boundary. If they made the full circle, I'd have one narrow driveway left, and judging by the fresh stakes in the ground, that wasn't going to last long. I marched back into the house, Banjo at my heels, hands shaking. Not from fear, from rage. I called the sheriff's department. The dispatcher was polite, asked if there was any immediate danger. I explained the situation, heavy equipment digging around my home without permission. A deputy showed up 35 minutes later. Young guy, name tag said Wilkins. He walked the perimeter with me, took notes, nodded a lot. When Karen came out with her same damn clipboard and smiled, he raised an eyebrow. "I've got maps," she said, handing him laminated sheets and pointing to what looked like boundary lines. Only these were suspiciously thicker than any official plat I'd ever seen. Wilkins looked at me, then at her. "We'll have to verify this with the county," he said. "For now, no one's crossing into your home lot, technically." "Technically?" I repeated, jaw tightening. "We don't make land determinations," he said. "That goes to zoning and cadastral services. I'll file a report. In the meantime, document everything. If you think it's a boundary violation, you might want to get a lawyer." Karen was already smirking behind him, waving her clipboard like a victory flag. That night, I sat on the porch with Banjo asleep by my boot and a lukewarm beer in hand. I watched the last backhoe idle away, leaving behind a half-dug ditch that ran like a scar along my land. The trench was already close to 5 feet wide and deeper than I cared to measure in the dark. They'd stopped work for the day, but I knew they'd be back. The next morning, they were. The machines returned, and this time they didn't bother keeping to one side. They crossed the invisible line, dragging their treads a few feet into what I knew damn well was my property. No permits posted, no warnings, no calls. I couldn't get out. They'd parked a dump truck across the last remaining opening in the perimeter, my only access to the county road. Even deliveries couldn't get through. My mail was rerouted to the nearest drop box. The trash company called to say they couldn't access my bins due to construction obstruction. I was officially landlocked in my own goddamn home. By Friday, it wasn't just a trench. It was a moat. And inside it, me. I've always believed in being prepared. Call it upbringing, call it stubbornness, call it the Boy Scout trauma of being left behind during a thunderstorm hike. Doesn't matter. The point is, I'd spent years making sure that if the world ever went sideways, I wouldn't be the one stuck holding a broken phone and no signal. So when Karen decided to play hardball, trenching me into my own damn land like some petty medieval warlord, what she didn't know was that I'd been watching her. Literally. A few years back, I installed a set of off-grid security cameras. Not the obvious kind you mount above your front door with a blinking blue LED and a subscription fee. No, these were motion-triggered trail cams and solar-powered micro-recorders, all hidden inside fence posts, birdhouses, and one particularly aggressive-looking garden gnome. They synced wirelessly to a private cloud account through a hardwired repeater buried under my shed. Paranoid? Maybe. But you grow up in Oklahoma. You get used to tornadoes, copper thieves, and the occasional meth head thinking your tool shed is public domain. That week, those cameras earned their damn keep. The footage was gold. One clip showed the backhoe clearly crossing the boundary. I had the original property markers in frame for comparison. Another showed 2 HOA workers dragging survey flags past my fence while laughing about how he'll cave by next week. But the crown jewel, a 23-second clip of Karen herself, standing beside a bulldozer, pointing at my well pump and saying, "Make sure that trench hits just shy of that thing. He can't live out here without water. He'll break faster than the zoning board." I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I just sat there in my workshop office, watching the footage on my old desktop, drinking lukewarm coffee and feeling something colder than anger settle in my bones. By mid-afternoon, I was at the sheriff's office. Deputy Wilkins was at the front desk. When I asked to speak to someone about unlawful land obstruction and vandalism, he winced a little and waved me back toward a private room. I brought a flash drive with the clips, labeled, time-stamped, geotagged. A supervisor named Carter came in 10 minutes later. Big guy, no nonsense. We watched the videos together. "Jesus," he muttered, as Karen pointed at the well on screen. "So?" I asked, arms crossed. He sighed. It's compelling. But land disputes get tricky. We'll need cadastral records, a proper third-party surveyor to confirm boundaries. I can file an official complaint and flag this for county review, but don't expect bulldozers to magically disappear tomorrow morning. I figured, I said, but now it's on record. Yep, and that, he said, pointing to the screen, might just be enough to make someone sweat. When I got home, I did what any rational man being slowly besieged by a pastel-clad HOA cult would do. I went online. First stop, local Facebook group. Sunny Hollow Chat, a cesspool of lawn care brags, lost dog posts, and HOA sycophants. I joined under my real name and dropped a short, polite post with 3 screenshots and a link to an unlisted YouTube video titled HOA Digging Trench Around Private Property Without Consent. It took off like dry grass in July. Comments rolled in. A few were from Karen's loyalists, folks who had clearly mistaken fascism for community spirit, but most were shocked. One guy posted, "Wait, that's around Evan's place? That's not even in the HOA." A woman added, "Is this even legal?" Within the hour, someone had tagged the local news station. By that evening, my inbox was flooded. Reporters, podcasters, random strangers asking for permission to repost. I said yes to everything. I also got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Nice video. I'd take your next few grocery deliveries by drone if I were you." Unknown. Cute. Meanwhile, the HOA didn't sit still. The next morning, I got an email from someone named Trevor Henley, HOA counsel. It was a cease and desist for defamatory content. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my coffee. I responded with one sentence. "See you in court. I've got more footage than Netflix." But Karen wasn't done. That afternoon, I heard a commotion near the well. I walked out with banjo and spotted 2 guys in reflective vests trying to install a fence along the edge of the trench, directly blocking my access to the pump controls. I shouted. They claimed they were securing a hazard zone. "You're trespassing," I snapped. "I have you on camera." "Talk to the HOA," one muttered as they walked off. I uploaded that too. Captioned it, "They just blocked my water. Sunny Hollow HOA doubles down." By sunset, the video had 10,000 views, and the local news had left me a voicemail asking for an interview. It wasn't much, not yet, but something had shifted. The world was watching. Karen had dug a trench, thinking she was isolating me. But what she didn't count on? I'd built a bridge, and it was made of surveillance footage, public outrage, and one very pissed-off Oklahoman who wasn't about to let his home be swallowed up by pastel-wearing tyrants with bulldozers. The thing about a trench is, once you dig it, it wants to get deeper. Same goes for idiots with power complexes. After my videos started making the rounds, I expected the HOA to panic. Maybe retreat, maybe go quiet, maybe even apologize. But no, Karen and her band of overly moisturized suburban warlords doubled down like they were running a damn casino and had the devil's luck on their side. It started with trucks, gravel trucks. 3 of them pulled in early Monday morning, kicking up dust and spilling chunks of limestone across the access road. They dumped the load right into the open trench near my eastern gate, the only place not fully severed from the outside world. By the time I got outside, one of the workers was spreading the gravel into what looked suspiciously like a roadway. "Whoa, hold up," I said, marching over. Hard hat guy didn't even blink. "HOA construction zone," he grunted. "Authorized egress path." "Authorized by who?" He tapped a laminated permit badge on his vest. It read, Sunny Hollow Infrastructure Division, which, as far as I could tell, was just a sticker someone slapped onto a clipboard during brunch. "You're not coming through my land," he shrugged. "Not your land." I pointed to the original survey marker, which I had staked into the ground myself. "That is 5 feet inside my boundary. You are officially trespassing." Smile. "You're on about 9 cameras right now." They left, eventually. But the gravel stayed, packed tight and level, like a driveway to nowhere. Then came the next move. They cut off access to my well. It didn't happen with a bang. No chains, no padlocks, no dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet morning when I found the entire path to the pump fenced off with temporary orange mesh and zip ties, and a laminated sign, "Notice, Restricted Zone, under Community Review." Community review my ass. I called the county water board. They hadn't approved any work in my area. I called the health department. Same story. Finally, I called my lawyer, Jenna. She picked up on the second ring and listened calmly while I vented. "Can you still access the pump?" she asked. "Barely, but if they keep going at this rate, I'll need a foxing grappling hook." "I'll file an emergency motion for injunctive relief," she said. "They're interfering with essential infrastructure. That's actionable." Meanwhile, Karen was working the neighborhood rumor mill like a champ. One neighbor, a nice guy named Steve with a nervous laugh, reached out via DM and warned me. "Just so you know, the HOA sent out a notice saying you're squatting on common land and ignoring cease and desist orders. Some folks are starting to believe it." I checked the Sunny Hollow Facebook page. Sure enough, there it was. Community alert, ongoing issue with a non-compliant property bordering HOA land. Resident has refused multiple legal requests and is obstructing community infrastructure upgrades. We appreciate your patience during this process. That post had 57 comments, most of them supportive. But a few started to turn. People asking things like, "Wait, I thought his land wasn't in the HOA?" Or, "Didn't that guy grow up there?" One woman even said, "I don't know what's going on, but digging a trench around someone's house feels medieval." Damn right, Susan. I kept feeding the fire. Every morning I posted a new clip, trucks blocking deliveries, workers tearing into my drainage path, Karen walking along the edge of the trench like she was scouting for siege weapons. My follower count doubled, then tripled. People from out of state started sharing memes. When the HOA becomes a dictatorship, you build a moat. Even a local news channel came knocking. Literally. The poor reporter had to park half a mile out and hike through the woods just to reach my fence line. We stood under the shade of a pecan tree while I explained how I'd been walled in by people who still held meetings about mailbox color codes. "Is it true they blocked your well access?" she asked. "Yep. Next week they're probably going to try cutting off my oxygen." The segment aired that night. It was short, dramatic, and ended with a slow zoom-in on Karen's trench, with ominous music playing in the background. I nearly choked on my dinner. I wish I could say that was the turning point. But then, like some kind of HOA escalation speed run, they escalated again. At exactly 2:43 a.m. Wednesday morning, I was woken by Banjo's growling. Not barking. Growling. That low, warning noise he only uses for raccoons or very dumb people. I looked out the front window and saw movement near the trench. Flashlights bobbing, the clank of metal, low voices. I grabbed my boots and coat and crept out the side door with my phone in one hand and a crowbar in the other. 2 men in matching HOA security windbreakers were unloading concrete blocks from the back of a pickup truck and dropping them into the trench, right where I'd cleared a small passage earlier that day to haul in water barrels. Standing nearby, watching in silence, Karen, no clipboard this time, no scarf. Just a smug smile and arms crossed like this was exactly what she'd been waiting for. I didn't say anything. I just raised my phone, turned on the flash, and filmed. That clip would be the next thing I uploaded, and the one that finally made the sheriff's department stop sitting on their hands. But I'll get to that. After that night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared. No, I was past fear. I was pissed. There's a fine line between pressure and provocation, and Karen had finally crossed it in steel-toed boots. I sat in my workshop for hours, reviewing the footage from my cameras. Every frame of those security guys hauling concrete into the trench. Karen, arms crossed, giving them the kind of nod you see in mob movies right before someone gets dumped into a river. One of the blocks even had spray-painted markings on it. HOA codes, maybe. I zoomed in, logged timestamps, clipped the files. Then I called Jenna. She didn't even say hello. "You okay?" she asked. "They're coming at night now," I said. Karen watched while they filled in my exit path with concrete. On video, pause. "I'll draft an emergency motion tonight. This is criminal now. We'll file in the morning, but I didn't wait for court. I waited until the next night. Same time. Same creeping diesel engine. I was sitting in the dark, porch light off, banjo curled by the door like a coiled spring. I'd already made my choice. I was done watching them destroy my land and call it landscaping. Done being reasonable. When the same pickup truck rumbled up and backed toward the trench, I stepped out. Slowly. Deliberately. Rifle slung over one shoulder. 12 gauge, legally owned, clean, and loaded. "Evenin'," I said, loud and flat. The two guys froze mid-lift. One had a cinder block in his hands, the other was mid-step, half in the trench. Karen, standing farther back this time in a different jacket, stiffened. "I'm gonna be real clear," I continued, not raising the gun, not threatening, just present. "This is private property. What you're doing is criminal trespass. If you set one more foot on my land, I will respond accordingly. Oklahoma law allows me to defend my home and property." The guy with the block set it down. Gently, like it might explode. Karen stepped forward, voice high, brittle. "This is outrageous. You're threatening people with a weapon." "No, ma'am," I said, as calmly as I could while keeping my voice from shaking with rage. "I'm stating facts. You've dug a trench around my home. You've blocked my water supply. You're destroying my infrastructure. And now you're sending people to sabotage my only access point in the middle of the damn night. All while standing on my land." One of the guys looked at her, then at me, then back at her. "Screw this," he muttered, climbing into the truck. Karen's face twisted. "You'll regret this, Evan." "I have every right." "No," I said, raising my phone and hitting record. "You don't?" By the time the sheriff's deputies arrived, and this time they came fast, I was back on the porch, rifle safely locked inside. Banjo still curled beside me like nothing had happened. The deputy wasn't Wilkins this time. This one was older, wore a wedding ring and a tired expression. "Mr. Reed," he said, tipping his hat. I nodded. "You might want to see something." I showed him the footage, from the front-facing camera, the side yard drone, the porch sensor, every second of the drop, the block placement, Karen's silent nods. I didn't need to embellish. The truth was enough. He watched in silence. When the last clip ended, he rubbed his jaw. "All right," he said. "This changes things." They took statements from me, from the retreating block crew. Karen refused to speak without counsel. "Fine by me," I said. I handed them the full footage archive, signed the paperwork, and watched from the porch as Karen's SUV backed down the gravel with no lights on. The next day, Jenna filed a motion to freeze all further construction by HOA until an emergency hearing could be held. The judge, a cranky old veteran named Dunley, granted it within hours. But it didn't stop there, because by then, the story had blown up. The clip of me confronting Karen, calm, armed, and stone-faced, had gone viral. Not just local viral, I'm talking national. Headlines like, HOA traps man on own land with trench. He fights back with footage and firearms. I got interview requests from news anchors I'd only ever seen while changing channels. YouTubers were reacting to my videos. One guy compared me to a modern-day castle defender and made a cartoon of me firing cinder blocks from a trebuchet made of lawn chairs. It was absurd and hilarious, but it was also useful. Because while Karen was ranting to whatever lawyer she could find about harassment and defamation, the real world was watching. And suddenly, every move they made was under scrutiny. Local officials started quietly distancing themselves. One city planner called me personally to apologize, claiming they had no idea HOA funds were being used for unauthorized excavation. A reporter from Tulsa Times confirmed what Jenna already suspected. The permits Karen had been waving around in front of deputies? Fabricated. Poorly, too. Watermarks didn't match. The file numbers were recycled. And worst of all, one signature belonged to a dead man. Meanwhile, I stayed put. My land, my house, my trench. I put up new signs. Not aggressive, just honest. Private property. Enter at your own legal risk. And I kept filming, because I had the feeling this wasn't over yet. The hearing room smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee, but to me, it might as well have been the damn Coliseum. One wrong move, and I'd be the guy getting eaten by bureaucratic lions while HOA reps tossed cinder blocks like popcorn. Jenna stood at my side, calm as ever, flipping through a binder that looked like it weighed more than a newborn. Across from us, Karen Martell, wrapped in a charcoal blazer that probably cost more than my truck, flanked by two attorneys with Bluetooth earpieces and egos you could smell. Judge Dunley didn't waste time. This is an emergency injunction request against Sunny Hollow HOA, filed by Mr. Evan Reed, claiming unlawful encroachment, infrastructure sabotage, and harassment. Let's proceed. Karen's lawyer jumped in first. All polish, no substance. He talked about miscommunication, shared boundary ambiguity, and community vision. Claimed the trench was a drainage solution, the block dump was unauthorized subcontractors acting independently, and the surveillance footage was selectively edited. Then Jenna stood up, and I swear, she didn't just speak, she carved. She laid out the original survey maps, marked and signed by county officials. A timeline of every trench dig, every obstruction, with matching video footage. A printed spreadsheet showing HOA budget misuse, tens of thousands spent on private contractors without community approval. Then came the clincher. Your Honor, the documents the HOA presented to law enforcement last week? We ran them through the registrar's office. They're forgeries. One signature belongs to a county official who died 3 years ago. This is not miscommunication. This is fraud. Karen paled. Her lawyers stopped scribbling. Judge Dunley tapped his pen for a long time before speaking. I'm issuing an immediate cease and desist on all HOA activity involving Mr. Reed's property. The trench must be backfilled, the well unblocked, and access restored within 7 days. A full criminal investigation will follow. I didn't smile, but Jenna did. Just a little. 3 HOA board members resigned the next day. One emailed me anonymously. "We were scared to speak out. Thank you." The police raided the HOA office that same week. Turns out, Karen had used HOA funds not just for the trench, but for everything: equipment, security, and even her personal landscaping. They froze the HOA's accounts and seized her laptop. Word spread fast. And then they arrested her. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy to intimidate, unlawful construction. The charges stacked like firewood. Her mugshot hit local news before her SUV was even towed. HOA members gathered on sidewalks, stunned. A few clapped. I didn't. I just watched from my porch as the trenching equipment was rolled away on flatbeds, one by one, and the ground around my land finally began to return to what it always should have been. Mine. They came to fill the trench on a Tuesday morning. County trucks, not HOA crews. Big machines, clean and efficient, undoing weeks of spite in a matter of hours. I stood on the porch with banjo and a cup of coffee, watching as they leveled the dirt, smoothed the road, and opened my land to the world again. Karen didn't show. Last I heard, she was awaiting trial, out on bond, her once pristine HOA kingdom now a legal minefield. Sunny Hollow dissolved the board entirely. A county trustee took over. Homeowners were furious. Some apologized. Some just avoided eye contact. That was fine by me. I got a letter 2 weeks later. Court awarded compensation for damages, legal fees, and emotional distress. Enough to fix the fencing, repave the driveway, and finally install that storm shelter I'd been putting off for years. But more than the money, it was the silence I appreciated. No bulldozers, no fake permits, no pastel tyrants measuring my grass height. A month later, I installed a new fence, solid cedar, 10 feet tall, with real concrete footings. On the west side, I added one little sign, nothing flashy, just bold black letters on a metal plate. Trench, 2025. Never again banjo sat beside me, tail thumping. Behind us, my land stretched wide and peaceful, just like it was meant to be.